Let's do lights out prayer.
Oh, what a lovely, precious dream to be young, gifted, and fun. Open your heart to what I mean. The whole world, you know, there's a million boys and girls who are young, gifted, and fun. And that's a fact. We must begin to tell our young. There's a world waiting for you. Yours is the quest that's just begun. When you feel real love, yeah, there's a great truth that you should know. When you're young, gifted, and right, you're so intact. How to be young, gifted. I long to know the truth. There are times when I look back.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. We're gonna get started in just a few seconds. We're just letting people in. There's a lot of people in the waiting room, so I'm just trying to get every single person in. We'll start in like 2 minutes. Feel free, you can keep your camera on or off, but we will be recording this. So if you don't want to be seen, that's fine. But I am recording it, so. But just listen and enjoy some beautiful Nina Simone as we get ready.
And I am haunted by my youth. But my joy of today is that we can all be proud to say, to be young, gifted, and back is where it's at. It's where it's at. It's where it's at.
Okay, we're gonna start now. Thank you all for coming. I'm Jenny. I will be the moderator today. If you guys didn't read the bios, that's all right. I'll just do a brief introduction. I am a rising junior at American. I'm an international studies student and a dance minor. I've been dancing since I was a little girl, and in college, I am part of the dance company at AU, which is where I met Dom and Chelsea. So I'll let Dom and Chelsea introduce themselves as well, first starting with Dom.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today and engaging in this conversation with us. I am Dominique Dempsey. I am an international relations and dance double major at American University. I'm also a rising senior, and I am excited to speak to you about this topic today. So handing it over to Chelsea.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Chelsea Greene. I just graduated from AU. I'm originally from West Orange, New Jersey. At AU, I studied elementary education with a minor in dance. But thank you all so much for even taking the time to come and listen to our conversation today. So, yeah.
Yes. Thank you all so much for being here. So just the outline of what we're going to talk about today. So first, Dom and Chelsea are going to talk about their pieces and just their overall experience with that. Then we'll touch on topics of diversity in the dance world. Then we'll talk about how dance is used as a response to what's occurring in the world. Then we'll transition to companies that we admire and underrated artists. Then we'll talk about the fundraiser for the International Association of Blacks in Dance. And then we'll end with a Q&A. So the general rules for what's going to happen on this Zoom conversation is that this will be recorded just for anyone who couldn't make it. If you'd like to not be seen, you can definitely stop sharing your video on Zoom. That's perfectly fine. We would like everyone to be mute. If you'd like to comment, just put it in the chat box and I'll just share your comments. And there will be a Q&A at the end, so you guys can show your faces and unmute yourself at the end. Okay, let's get started. So do you want to play the slideshow now or?
I think we can play it as we talk.
Okay, sure. Okay. We'll start with you, Dominique.
Okay.
So do you want to share about your piece, Go Play in the Sun, and what inspired you to create the piece?
Yes, so in 2019, American University has this student showcase called Choreolab. And so all students, no matter your major, no matter what you're interested in, are allowed to apply. And so I have always experienced a phenomenon called colorism within the Black community. And for those who don't know, because I don't want to assume that you know, colorism is a tendency to perceive or behave toward members of a certain racial category based on the lightness or the darkness of their skin tone. So often that leads to people who are of darker skin getting discriminated against in their own racial groups. This is not only in the Black community, this is in Latinx communities, Asian communities, etc. And so I felt like I really wasn't seeing work addressing this topic. I felt like I wasn't really being represented in that way. And so I wanted to create a piece that talked about this and addressed it. Because many don't know that colorism also affects how people are charged, how you are able to get jobs. It affects many aspects of everyday life. So my piece entitled Go Play in the Sun is based off of my research question, how do individuals react to the sun? Or like how does skin color affect an individual's relationship with the sun? So based on that research question, my dancers and I were able to dive into movement research and also physical research, where we looked at articles, videos, books, and we had to first understand what colorism was, because not everyone was Black, not everyone was multi-ethnic who was in my work. So first we had to have a common understanding of what it was, and then we were able to dive into the meaning and into the movement. So Go Play in the Sun is really about, it's a joyful piece. It's somber because colorism is a serious thing, but it's also a command of telling people who were told before not to go play in the sun, that you can go play in the sun, that you can not worry about how dark you're going to get, because that shouldn't be something that you have to worry about. Skin bleaching should not be something that you have to be concerned about or doing in order to get lighter because of how much time you're spending in the sun. So the work really experiments with call and response to testimonials from people who have experienced colorism themselves, who have experienced skin bleaching. I often quote Malcolm X in my work when he talks about who told you to hate the color of your skin. And the piece doesn't end in a state of peace, in a state of happiness, because that's not reality, right? So in the end of the piece, Malcolm X is kind of repeating the word bleach, because that is something that's echoed across the world that you should do if you're under a certain skin tone, right? So I wanted to leave that there and have the discussion let it be a breeding ground of discussion, because that is something that African Americans face all the time. So yeah, that's a bit about my piece. I hope I covered it.
Thank you for that. So you talked about not everyone being a person of color in your cast. So do you want to maybe elaborate like the challenge that you face with that?
Yeah. I was worried off the bat in the audition process, because I knew going in the summer that I wanted to make a piece about race. But I go to a PWI, and that means, for those who don't know, a predominantly white institution. So automatically, I knew that my audience, or that the people in the audition room, were not going to necessarily represent the cast that I ideally wanted in my head, right? So I think there's like 5 Black identifying majors and minors in our program. So that gives you a picture of like what diversity looks like in our major. And so I went in knowing that I was going to have to educate, but I also knew that because of the ideals of our dance department, that we would have people who would empathize, we would have people who were willing to learn about what colorism was and adequately like represent what it meant to me and what it means to people of different ethnicities. Right. So going in, some challenges that I had was really trying to understand how to explain it to someone who didn't know what colorism was. Because for the longest, I only have the conversation with other Black people or other Asian people or other like Latinx identifying people who knew what colorism was because they had experienced it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to explain to someone else and have them understand what you're going through, like what kind of discrimination, what kind of prejudice is a result of colorism. Yeah. And so that's kind of a struggle that I had, but also a victory of being able to explain it to someone through not only research, but also through movement. So, yeah.
Let's see. Did you at all ever wanted to back out of doing the piece at all? You know, colorism is a heavy topic, like you mentioned. So, I mean, did you have a difficult time, like, I guess, having colorism come across your movement and your piece? And did that ever make you want to back out of doing it?
Yeah, I definitely had moments where I was like talking to the fellow choreographers who were in my cohort and was like, I just don't know what I'm doing anymore, guys. Like, I felt like I wanted to just make a piece like about African dance. I was like, well, now what if I just make a piece using African vocabulary, like vernacular? Like that would be the easy way out, to just have like maybe some Malcolm X in the background, maybe some like testimonials or something, and like try to like force the African vocabulary in the dance because that was easy. Yeah. But then I was like, then I met with Erin Foreman Murray, and she is a professor at AU. And she was really encouraging me to not take the easy road out, because she's like, you're passionate about this topic, you know about this topic, you don't see it being represented already, so you need to make the space and adequately address this piece and what this work is talking about. And so I also want to encourage anybody out there who is a Black choreographer who is listening or who is going to watch this in the recording, to actually address that piece, because it's so rewarding in the end to just put in that work on the forefront, because so many people were touched who didn't know what colorism was in my audience, and they were able to understand it and were interested in getting to know more. One of my dancers, her grandmother came, and her grandma was like 80, 85, never had heard of colorism. She's a white woman, never had heard of colorism, never addressed it, never experienced it. But because of the piece and because of her granddaughter being in the work, she was interested, she was invested, and she learned and was educated about the topic. So I definitely want to encourage you guys to address like that hard, difficult topic that you may not want to talk about. And it was emotionally draining sometimes, because I felt like I was just being overcome with all this negative research. But there's definitely support systems that you can talk to people to map it out, map your ideas out. But definitely it was a struggle.
Yeah. What did you use? Like, what tools, what would you suggest that people use to help kind of capture the whole message that you wanted to use? Like you said, African vocabulary, but say that they don't have background in that. What did you rely on? Like, was it music? Was it etc.? If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I definitely, one medium that I'm really happy I brought into the studio was video, because I felt like we had read an article, we had talked about it, we had mapped out some ideas on our drawing board, on the blackboard in the studio. We had even moved a bit of utilizing some prompts. But when I showed a video of children speaking about how colorism was affecting them and how they felt like because they're dark skinned they're ugly, because they're dark skinned they're not as pretty as the white doll, like they're bad, like different attributes. I don't know if you guys heard of the doll test, but it's basically where there's a white doll and a black doll, and they ask a child who's the pretty doll, who's the smart doll, who's the who's the good doll. And most of the times the positive attributes went to the white doll and the negative attributes go to the dark doll. But then in the end they ask the black students so what doll looks like you? And of course it's the black doll, but you just said all these negative things about the attributes of the black doll's color of skin, right? So I feel like that also opened some eyes, and some great movement research came out of that session after we had seen that video, because it really hit home about what colorism was about and who it was affecting and how young it affects individuals. Yeah.
Let's see. We touched on the challenges, we touched on casting. You didn't experience any backlash at all. You talked about how one of your cast members' grandma was very woken about your piece in general. Let's see. Talked about what kept you going. Is there any other things that you wanted to touch on before I go into Chelsea's piece?
No, I think we covered it. Yeah.
Okay.
Right now, yeah.
All right, so we'll turn it to Chelsea. So, Miss Chelsea, do you want to talk about your pieces? How you've touched on police brutality? Have you touched on race as well?
So I made my first performed work when I was 16. It was called 1960 Now. And that piece, I made it because it was a slew of things. Trayvon Martin happened, Mike Brown happened, Tamir Rice happened, and I didn't know how to process that information. So my processing was making this work, and I had two groups, and we called them the 1960s people, and they were dressed in, I went to an antique store and begged them to borrow these antique 1960 civil rights movement looking dresses. And then the 2015s were the people who were the now, and they were in a gray hoodie and black leggings, basically wearing the same thing that Trayvon Martin was wearing, a gray hoodie. And the two groups are dancing together, and you're seeing the two of them separate, and then they eventually merge together, because we're seeing that what's going on in our country is cyclical. As much as we want to say we have history so we don't do it again, it's like we're still repeating the same processes over and over again. So there's a lot of circular motions in the piece, because I was like, this just keeps going around and going around in a circle. And I think the big thing for me, the opening part of the piece is the 2015 people are walking forward while the 2015 people are walking backwards while the 1960s people are walking forward. So they're continuously like merging and crossing with each other. But I had the 2015s go backwards because I was like, we're literally like, regressing isn't the word, but like we're going back to the same thing that the people in the civil rights movement were doing. So that was my way of processing that information, everything that I had dealt with in high school and before that. So it was just a processing for me. And then I got to AU and I made Dear Mothers of the Movement, which was inspired by a class letter. We had an assignment for AU Experience, which is like this class where they're supposed to talk about like race, gender, equity. They're still working on it, so I'm not gonna bash them for it. My freshman year, you had to write a letter to a civil rights figure, and everyone's doing the Martin Luther King, a very stereotypical Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. Where there were a few that I didn't think of, like somebody mentioned Cesar Chavez, like a few other people, but it was very much so like the like 5 Black history figures that we all know about. So I was like, I'm not gonna do that. So I wrote a letter to the mothers of the Black Lives Matter movement, which specifically I wrote it to Tamir Rice's mom, Mike Brown's mom, and Trayvon Martin's mom. And it basically was an essay and a letter. I wrote it, and then I let it sit, and I was like, I don't know why I want to do something with this. So when we made Dear Mothers of the Movement, I brought in that letter. And originally I was going to have the people in my dance read the letter, and they all read it. They all highlighted areas that they connected with the most, and they made a short solo based off of that. And I just remember, okay, guys, like, we're going to come in one day and we're going to record this. And then everybody was like, I don't want to read this. They were like, we don't want to read it. And of course I was like, what? I was like, because I had this whole plan in my head. I was like, there's going to be tons of voices and yada, yada, yada. And then they all were like, this is your letter. Like, this is your, this isn't our letter. Like, this is your voice. Like, let it be your voice. And I wasn't mad at all. I was shocked because I was just like, I had this plan in my head and I was like, oh, great. Boom, it blows up. But they all were like, this is your letter. Like, we don't want to take away from what you have to say. Like, we'll do the movement, we'll do the dancing, but the voice that's coming from this is yours. So I ended up reading it. I also think I didn't want to read it because I like hate the sound of my own voice. So I didn't want to read it because I was like, I don't want to hear myself. And then it's projected in an entire theater. So I ended up reading it and having my voice be on the backtrack of the music. But it was like, I think for me, it was so amazing to see, because originally, like Dominique, I had a plan and I said, I want to this is going to be a dance with women of color, Black women specifically. And like Dom said, we don't, like, that's just, AU is predominantly white. We don't have that. Like, we don't have those resources. But it was so refreshing to see. Everyone was very gung-ho about this. They were like ready. Everyone was like, oh yeah, I want to do this thing. And even if they didn't know, they wanted to educate themselves, which was really refreshing to see. Because prior, like in high school, like people didn't want to educate themselves. So it was nice to see people wanted to educate themselves and learn and want to be a part of this process. And then it was also a therapeutic process for me, because it was me processing things that were going on still. So every time I make something, it's me just processing. So it was them, they helped me process, and they also helped me be okay with me having my voice. Like, they were like, they literally like like we came in, I had the little record thing. I borrowed it from, I borrowed Henry. If anyone knows Henry Mayer, I borrowed it from Henry. And I came in there with a recorder, and they all, like, it felt like, when I walked in, it felt like they all had a meeting before I got in there, and they all
I think we did.
Okay, so maybe you did. I don't know, but I walked in there, and it seemed like everybody was like, and they were like, we don't want to read. They were like, we don't want to read this. But it was just, I was so proud of it at the end, because it also allowed the dancers to have their own work in my work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They made their own solos, and they made their, you know, and it kind of felt like I was building blocks. Like I had a block of like Dominique solo, and I had a block of Jess's solo, and I went like this, and then I had another block, and then I had my own block that, you know, so it just eventually like led into one big thing. And then I remember Britta was my faculty advisor for Choreolab, if that's the correct term. She was my advisor, mentor for the piece. So I had one part of the piece in the beginning, and I remember Britta was just like, flip the whole thing. Like, flip the whole thing. Mind you, we had like 4 rehearsals left. So we had like 4 rehearsals left, and she was just like, I think you should flip it. So I was like, okay, I'll flip it. Like, it's fine. Like, I'll flip it. And it, like, I'm so glad that we did that in the end. Like, I'm so thankful that because I think it looks 10 times better, and the flow of it looks better. But I just remember I came in and I was like, guys,
Right.
not changing it particularly. We just gotta like flip the whole thing. And then, so in 4 rehearsals, I think we only had 2-hour rehearsals. So
Wow.
we like not redid the piece, but like restructured the whole thing. But I was so thankful for that. And yeah, overall it was a great experience. Let me stop talking before you.
No. Okay, so you said like people had like their own works within your piece. So how did you, can you elaborate more on like how that happened?
So I brought in the letter, and I just like had copies, and I was like, okay, everyone take 5, I think the actual letter was like a page and a half. So I was like, everyone take 5 minutes or 10 minutes, highlight things or underline things that you resonate with. Like, look at the thing and like see what you resonate with the most. Things that you like. It didn't have to just be resonate, but like just you liked this sentence or something worked for you. So I had everyone do that, and then I had split everyone up, and I said, you know, make something type thing, just like, here you go, like, see what you can make. So everyone made a solo, and then I looked at all of the solos, and I just pieced them in certain parts. Like there were certain, like in this picture, Danielle is in the like reddish dress in the back. That was her solo moment. But I always made sure the solo moment had something also going on at the same time that wasn't connected to it. But I had them make these solos, and I just kind of put the puzzle pieces together from there. But I like doing that because it gives the dancers a sense of ownership to this work too. Like, it's important. Like, it was important for me to make it for me, but I wanted everyone involved to have a connection to it as well, in whatever way it was, because I'm a Black woman, and I experienced this piece as a Black woman. Like everyone else in the piece experiences it in their own way, but I wanted them to have that experience and share that experience as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I should ask the same for Dom as well. I don't think you really touched on how each individual person was able to have some ownership of your piece. So do you want to quickly talk about that as well?
Yeah, so for mine, it kind of mirrored Chelsea's a bit, but instead of like pieces of the letter, it was more so quotes, words that were influential that we found from our research that we had been talking about. One time, bathing in the sun was make a phrase based off that term, or make a phrase based off the statement, don't go play in the sun. Make a phrase based off of hiding. So a lot of phrase work. We also, my cast hated me for it, but I made them reverse things. I made them intertwine things where they had a duet and they would have to combine a solo and a duet, or they would have to learn everybody's solo. They have to learn everybody's duet. But in the end, it it unified the cast in the sense of they got to not only see through other people's eyes, but move in other people's movement forms within my piece. So I think it brought a lot more depth to the work that it wouldn't have had if I was the only person putting the movement on them. I did do a lot of some of the phrase work, but it's important for me when I'm choreographing something to have the cast members feel like they have ownership over work. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So back to Chelsea. So were there any similarities or differences to how you approached your pieces from the one that you did in high school, from the one that you did in Choreolab?
Definitely, it's so funny. My dance school still does this dance, and every time I see it, I slightly cringe. Because also I made it when I was 16. So like my dance vocabulary and like my understanding of making work at 16 wasn't the same. And it's not like I was 19. Like it's like not that big of a difference, but like my maturity in terms of like me dancing, because I went from high school dance to dancing at AU, which is, I felt like I was like got a broader education with dance and being exposed to things. So the vocabulary of the work is completely different. Like my first piece, it was like very like chasse and like, very like it's still good. Like I still like it, but it's very like it seems very young and just like very like not as what I know to be now.
Yeah.
And like I keep asking my dance teacher, I'm like, let me get in there and just fix this dance. Like, let me do it. And she's like, no, so I think the process was definitely completely different because I learned a new process while I was at AU, and like me creating my first dance by myself. Like my way of just figuring out the dance was dance in like the living room, and then if I like something enough, I just need to remember it in my brain to give it to them on Saturday. Like I didn't know to write things down, and I didn't know, like I didn't have a lot of that understanding.
Right.
So majority of that dance comes from me rather than collaborating with other dancers. So a lot of it is just like me doing. I was like, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do this, you're gonna chasse across the stage, and you're gonna chase her.
Yeah.
It was like it was very directed rather than collaborative. So I think the process when I came to AU, it forced me to collaborate with others and hear their voice, and I wouldn't say I was like very dictatory like when I was 16, but it was just more I had like a bigger leadership role than I had when I was choreographing at AU.
And that's like kind of what we grew up, at least me personally, that's like what I grew up knowing, that, your teacher just gives you something, you do it, you perform it, you're done.
Like I had the mindset like perform and execute. So it was like when I wanted to make my own dance, here's the step. I don't care if your left hip is hurting you today, please. So it was very perform and execute. But when I got to AU, it wasn't perform and execute. It was like, why are we even doing this? Like, why are you, like, I used to remember for even Britta and Aaron, when I did both Choreolabs, they were like, but why? It was like, like when like a little kid's like, just like, but why? But why?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. I just want them to chasse across the floor. But it's like, but why?
Yeah.
Understanding what the purpose of certain things were was definitely a big, big shift for me. And like putting actual emphasis and purpose to things was like the big shift in terms of processing and making a choreographic process. And like Britta made me reorganize everything and like my structure of how I prepared. Like when I prepared in high school, it was just like, okay, I'm gonna do this, this, and this. And like Britta was like, you have an hour or whatever it was. You have 2 hours by yourself as a choreographer. Like, what are you doing in that 2 hours for yourself to then relay that information to the dancers? So it was a big like overhaul of how I created work and processed things very much.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. I had a different like change in perspective when it came to even just I haven't choreographed anything yet, but just being in Dom's piece and like other choreographed pieces, I can see there was a huge shift in thinking. So I do want to talk about like maybe your fears or challenges as well with your pieces, since they are very heavy and relevant to current issues. So obviously like dance can be interpreted in different ways. Not everyone knows how to like interpret dance when they see a dance performance. So did you have that fear of, oh my gosh, they're not going to understand it?
I was really scared that like how Dom said somebody's 80-year-old grandmother was there. Like I thought somebody's like great grandmother was gonna come in there and like, you know, because the choreo lab, at the end of choreo lab, you have a moment where the artists can sit on the stage, everyone sits on the stage, and people in the audience can ask questions or give feedback. And I was like, I am so scared that somebody is gonna raise their hand and tell me that this was horrible and how, you know, like, because I think I was also very nervous as a Black person. Especially I was groomed in a high school where there weren't many Black girls, so me speaking up about Black issues was like a really big thing. So I was very nervous to see if that cycle was going to happen again. So I was like, somebody is going to raise their hand and say something. And I said, I have to be professional. Like I had to like prepare myself to be like, you know, thank you for your comment. And like, you know, try and respond in the best way to have an effective conversation. So I prepped myself for it. Luckily that didn't happen, and I'm so thankful it didn't happen. But that was a big fear, that people were like, I don't get this, and like there was no point to this, and yada yada. I don't know if that was the same for Dom, but for me,
yeah, it's scary. And I feel like, I don't know, as a choreographer, you think about the audience and their reaction and how well they'll interpret it. So you're not really thinking about the message itself, or maybe your message will get lost, or you'll try to like make it easier on the audience's eyes, you know what I mean? So I can't imagine.
Can I add something really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, I think I also was scared of people being like, oh, it's just another piece about race. Like, I was so scared that people are gonna like discount the nuances and the difference between colorism and racism because they just saw it as another piece about race. Now, like my costumes were like African print, y'all. So like immediately people are gonna have preconceived notions about seeing African print on stage.
Right.
And so I literally was like, I just hope they just don't discount it and they understand the nuances of what I'm trying to talk about. And I think some people did. And I think some people will always have that assumption when they see something by a Black person about Black issues that it's just another piece about race. But that's their problem. And I've come to like know that as an artist, that I don't have to worry about that. I just need to put out my work and let people come to their own conclusions, because at least it's being discussed now.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we're going to transition to topics of diversity in the dance world. Is there anything specifically you guys wanted to share with our audience about diversity?
When we were talking about this first, you know, we were saying like we all come in, like not we all, but like me and I can say for Dom, we came and we're like, I'm gonna do this piece about Black like art or life, etc. And you're like, this is what I want to do. And so I would say in terms of diversity in the dance world in general, it's like you always have to be, you can't expect it all the time. Like unless you're going to a company that's specific for Black bodies or people of color, like you can't always expect it to be, you know, you always have to have a plan B. But I always just, I come in with the idea and then I say like, here's plan B, C, D, like all the way to G. You know, just in case. I think, you know, there's diversity in the dance world. I wish I just saw it more. I think specifically, if we don't throw some shade, so to the ballet world, I wish there was more of that in the ballet world. You know, things that are going on now, a lot of ballet companies are getting a little flack right now because they haven't said anything and they have Black bodies in their company, and like, you know, not speaking up and showing their support for their Black dancers has been a big thing on my mind in terms of diversity, especially with what's going on in the world now.
Yeah, I think also I have seen progress in the sense of like, when I was little, I would have to paint my ballet shoes my skin color. Or I would have to wear like these pasty looking brown tights because they didn't have my shade, right? Or like leotard, you had to dye them, right? So I think certain capacities, like there are Black owned leotard and dance accessory companies coming out. There are more tools being like specifically made for Black bodies in dance because we make up a big percentage of who is dancing. I also think there's a lot of, when I think about diversity in dance, it's hard not to disassociate the word appropriation, right? Because you see a lot of white bodies taking advantage of originally Black forms, jazz, hip hop, urban styles.
Yeah.
Like all those things Black bodies created but aren't getting credit for them, right? So like when I see a white company like doing hip hop, I'm like, where's the diversity? Like, did you hire a Black choreographer to choreograph that piece so that they could tell them about the history, so that they can tell them about what it means to the Black community?
Mm-hmm.
Did you cast Black dancers? Are you looking for Black dancers when you're casting?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you know what I mean? Like, so it's different things like that. When I think about diversity, immediately the word appropriation comes like right near it.
Yeah.
It's hard to find diverse dance companies that are actually doing the thing well.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of like brings me to think about Tatiana and like house a lot. So do you want to like speak on that at all? Like how, you know, she really took the time to teach us about what house dance is and like where all these movements are coming from, you know, just like stuff like that. Like, do you find choreographers even taking the time to, you know, teach and like speak about the dance forms that they're practicing? Like, have you guys personally like experienced that at all?
Yeah, there's definitely artists who are doing that and taking the time to educate their other movers about Black art forms. I know Britta's on here, but I'm just going to shout out Britta because Britta is somebody that I know takes the time to do that. So like whenever we've talked about jazz or you know, done anything that was specific to house, anything like in dance company, but like also in just like regular class, she's taking the time to tell us where these things are coming from, or she'll bring somebody to tell us. Like if like you can't do it, she can get somebody else who will do it, or she will give us something to read or video to watch. Like, you know, there are people taking the time to do that, and I just wish that it was done more often because you're seeing a lot of dance companies come out and they're like doing this like hip hop move, but like they don't even know what like you're doing like house movement, you're doing the farmer, but like where did that come from? Like why do you know why you're doing that, or are you just gonna like shut it type thing?
Right.
So just like
knowing where it comes from, that'll help you execute the dance better. Like
you're
not just doing the movement, you're not just pop and lock in, like you know where each movement's coming from.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's see. I think there's a comment from KT. Not only did Tatiana make sure she was teaching us about where house comes from, but she also highly encouraged those of us in the piece to go out and do our own work to learn about the form. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I think it's a two-way street. It's the same thing that you can have somebody, it's the same thing that's going on now. Like you can get the information from somebody, but you also have the tools to research yourself.
Yeah.
Google is a thing. If you didn't know, Google is amazing.
Google right now, it's very clear that some of y'all did not learn how to use the Google algorithm. Cool, but the Google algorithm does work. So I think it's even with dance, like you can get the tools, but then you can take the initiative yourself to find even more tools after that. So.
And I think that's like another thing where choreography enacts change, right? Because you have this choreographer coming in who is telling you about this history of Black bodies, who is telling you that you can go research yourself. So that like I feel like that enacts change right there, where it's like the dancers in the piece have the opportunity to go do that research and to learn about the struggles that this community is facing, right? So I feel like that's another way that somebody who never would have interacted or been interested in something, but because they're a dancer, they can now go do this research themselves. So yeah.
I just wanted to briefly talk about like, how do you guys feel being like the only Black girl maybe in a dance studio? do you want to talk about that as like I've come to realize that like being in white spaces, I've kind of limited my movements a lot. I'm just like, ooh, I don't want to look too, don't want to do the most. And that's kind of like ripped off like my overall experience as a dancer. So do you guys want to speak on, because when I think about diversity, it's not only like within the choreographers, the teachers, but you personally?
Yeah, I think for me, at first, like when I first came to AU, I was very nervous. Also, still coming off of like high school. Like, so for background, I went to a elementary and middle school that was mainly like Black, Hispanic, Latinx students, and then I went to high school and I went to a private school, and it was majority white. There was, in my graduating class in high school, there was I think 7 of us out of 76 girls in the school.
Wow.
Black who graduated. So I came from that, like you could imagine the nonsense that occurred, to coming to AU. And I was very nervous, and like I was like, I didn't want to ruffle too many feathers, and like, I was like, let me stay in the back, like, let me, hide myself. And I remembered I'm a Leo and I prefer to have attention on me. So I, of course I grew and seeing that the company, the dance program and the dance company was very inclusive and open, and, if you've been in the AU dance company, even if you haven't, like, you will hear us down the hall hooting and hollering for our friends going across the floor. So it was a very big shift because it wasn't a competition anymore, and it wasn't anything like that. It was like just supporting the person next to you because they're and they're dancing and they're like heaving and they can't breathe because it was, a rigorous across the floor or whatever. Like, just support them. Like, you don't have to just look at them and be like, girl, why are you like, so I definitely like grew in my shell, out of my shell because of that. And like, but at first I will definitely say I was very like guarded with my movement, and I was like, I'm going to do a lateral T and I'm going to do it well, type.
Yes.
Love
Yeah,
that.
no, definitely for me, I went to a predominantly Black school, but then my church and my neighborhood were like predominantly white growing up. Also, like the ballet studio I went to when I was in like middle school, predominantly white. Middle school, Dominique hated her body because she didn't look like the other white dancers in the room. And so that has been also a journey of mine, is accepting what my body looks like and knowing that it won't fit the Eurocentric beauty standards.
Yeah.
Like 99% of the time. Like, and so that's another thing that I am just coming to terms with in college, that definitely my experience at American University has helped me with, accepting that my body has capabilities and it has talents and it has things that it does well, right? It may not do the things that somebody else's body does well who's a ballet dancer, but that's okay, right? So also coming to that realization that different bodies look different because of different race groups. Like, it's just a thing, and so that's another thing that I definitely have been challenged and I'm growing in every day.
Lauren says, thank you for speaking on that. It's another obstacle for Black bodies in dance.
It truly is. Like, I mean, you have to think about your skin tone. Like, you already come into the studio, like, I don't know if they're looking for a Black dancer when you're coming to an audition. But then on top of that, like, I have bigger boobs, a bigger bottom, like a bigger waist than most of these dancers in this room. And my first vocabulary may not be ballet. Like, when you go to an audition, the first thing that you normally ask you is for Eurocentric forms, ballet, contemporary, right? But then you have me, who I am very inept in African, in liturgical dance, like Black forms of dance that not necessarily everyone does, but are important, and that I have a talent in. But I may not be able to show them that because they're not asking for that, or they have a certain lens on their eyes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jeez. Okay, well, we're gonna move on. We have, 26 minutes, so we might need to speed through. So let's talk about how dance is used as a response to the world. We kind of touched on that with you guys as individual pieces, but are you guys, being inspired by what's going on today? Do you guys have any pieces in the making, you know?
She's definitely in the works.
I know.
Yeah.
So when Dom and I were first talking about this, and like I'm good because I wrote it down because it's good. Dominique she said to me, and I said, wow, my mind is, she goes, do I make art about the oppression I'm experiencing, or am I just making art to make art? And so I think that like really made me think, oh my gosh, like I can say for me, all of my work that I try and do, and I like, you know, really like that's like my thing, is my experience as a Black woman. And I think for me, I'm going to say for a lot of other Black artists, it's the same thing. I'm continuously making work about this issue of something. It's always connected to something in Black life. It could be an issue in the community, whatever, but I continuously find inspiration to make work about oppression. Do my other friends who are not Black have the same idea when they're creating work? Like maybe it's something that, you know, but it's like I'm talking about my oppression or my people's oppression or something like that, compared to somebody else who's just like, this is not to diminish anybody. It's like, I saw a beautiful flower and I want to make a dance about a flower today.
Right.
So like there's a big difference between like what Black choreographers are making versus what non-Black choreographers are making. So I feel like that, I heard that and I said, you know what, let's write this down, because
Yes.
I didn't think about, and like, you know, when I connect better to the works that like I see, especially like, you know, when there are works about Black church, if there are works that have hip hop in it or talking about segregation times, historical pieces that are specific to Black people, like I connect to that art the most because that's what I know and that's what I experience the most, coming from Black choreographers. So I think my lens in the world as a Black artist is specifically like to look at what I go through rather than it's just like I'm inspired by the chair that's next to me today.
There's a difference. Like, I feel like as a Black choreographer, as a Black artist, I have a responsibility to my community to make art about the oppressions that we're facing. When I have a platform, I feel like it is that the time is now. Like, we didn't tell you we were coming, but we're coming now, and the time's now. Like, I have to make a piece about what I'm going through. And so I feel like some of my white counterparts white artists don't have to have that tuggle in their mind of, I am interested in some things that don't have anything to do with race, right? I have pieces that I want to make that don't address any of what I'm going through. But I feel like when I have a platform, I have to make those pieces because I owe that to the community. I owe that to dancers who don't know. I owe that. And so that's just something that I toggle with. And that's what that conversation with Chelsea came out of what do I make work about? So
why use dance as a response? There are different medias, there's different forms of art, so why dance?
I can't draw, so
I can't
so that was a no, and I can't sing. But I could do something where I keep my mouth shut, and that is dance, definitely. But honestly, I think physically manifesting your emotions in some way, just, you know, painting can also do that, but like physically putting that in your body and like moving based on that makes me feel good, and it makes things just like release. And I let go of things better if I can manifest like what it is I'm feeling in my body, like not just my brain, but like what my body is feeling. And if I can move that, I feel like I physically move it out of my system. Like you know, they're always like, dance it out. Like physically, like I physically just like let it go. So I think dance for me is the best mode for me because I don't get to like put as much physical energy into it as much as like you know, coloring mandala book or something, you know. If that makes sense.
I have a friend and she always tells me, like, we were rooming together sophomore year and she would always come back to me like dancing, and she was like, Dominique, you don't talk about your problems, you don't write your problems down, you just dance through your problems. And I was like, wow, like, you're right. Like, it's just such a great way to process what you're going through. Art has that power in general. And if your first form isn't dance, like I know some people on here are musical theater, or they do plays, or they do writings and things. And I just think art in general, whatever your first art language is, that is just a great way to process what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
I've come to so many conclusions that way. I've come to a state of peace. I found community through dance. Like, there's just so many things that dance brings that other forms don't bring. One thing that I do miss due to Corona is being in a studio with other bodies. Like,
Yeah.
there is nothing like being in a West African dance class where there's live drummers. Mama Sylvia or Mama Marcia is in the front of the room. They're dancers. They teach at Dance Place. Go there. That's a shout out. But anyway, so they teach, and then you have people of all skill levels, all races, all ages, like in the same studio, moving together, and
Yeah.
it's just unparalleled, like
Yeah.
to anything. It's something that I think everyone should experience, and moving is just a real blessing to us.
Yeah.
To be able to have. That's the only way I can talk about dance. It's really, yeah.
Lauren says emotional and physical decompression, and
Yeah.
Joshua,
Yeah.
some exclamation points on that. But yeah, yeah. Anyways, moving on. Companies that we admire and underrated artists. So,
Dom, you want to take that one first?
yeah.
Yeah, I can start with one artist that I have. So this semester, I was studying abroad at Hebrew University during their Dance Jerusalem program. That brings up another topic, but I won't talk about it today. But anyway, so there, we took a dance in Israel class where we learned about different choreographers in the Israeli scene. And so one choreographer, she's an Ethiopian Jew. She emigrated to Israel through Project Moses. Her name is Dej Feder. And she has a work called Jalo, and she now is the artistic director of the Beta Troupe, and they perform contemporary renditions and traditional renditions of Ethiopian shoulder dancing. And so I think you should definitely check her out. Her work addresses a lot, like a lot. She faces anti-Semitism and racism, like, whoa. Okay, so her work is a great thing to witness and to process. So I definitely would say check Dej Feder out. At the end of this, we have your emails, and so we will send you a list of like complete artists that you should definitely check out. But that's one that is on my mind right now.
Dominique put this down herself, but I am a Camille A. Brown stan also. I love her work, and I don't know why the name isn't coming to you right now, but there's one where she has a chalkboard in the back. I
know what you're talking about.
Yes. So it is just, and it's a mix of movement and conversations, like, there's dialogue and stuff, but it just opened my eyes, and like I think it's so like it's lovely because it puts something I think that everyone could possibly relate to. Like you have as kids we were playing, like if you played outside, you played on the chalk with your friend, like on the like blackboard with your friends, and used chalk, and it made me realize how a lot of the things that like I'm not noticing, a lot of the things that are just so general to everyone to understand, like a piece of chalk is something that a lot of people can connect to. And then through that piece of chalk, you can make a work that gets more and more and more specific as it goes. Like you start, we have a piece of chalk, but then how does that piece of chalk come connected to Black issues? It does that. Like for me, so I super, super, super fan of her.
Yeah.
Anyone else you can think of?
I mean, I feel like there's some companies that everyone knows, like of course Alvin Ailey, Philadelphia is another great company that I admire. I have them all written down on the list. I'm just trying to think of now. Catherine, the Catherine Smith Contemporary Ensemble. She is locally based in DC. Catherine Smith, the director of the company, teaches at Duke Ellington, Howard University, and the Washington Ballet. So she herself is a phenomenal artist. She danced with Philadelphia, I believe. And her company, which I was in, had the honor of being in, really reaches young Black artists, encouraging them to choreograph, encouraging them to be in work that represents them. So we do a lot of, as I call, like, Revelations-esque work. So a lot of work with Black influences, meaning the vocabulary, also the music, and so also the guest choreographer she brings in. So yeah, that's another one. Excuse me.
Problem. There's a question here. If you have, what's the best way you deal with people around you that show hate towards you in a big audition room?
I've had that before. I've definitely done that. I auditioned in high school for Joffrey, a Joffrey intensive, and I just remember I walked in there like the only Black girl, and you know, you get the like, you know, the like bun head who like looks at you and like does the up,
the up and down,
the up and down type thing. Did not help. It was clear that a lot of them have already like know like the spaces and like they're regulars to Joffrey, etc. You know, I couldn't even get somebody to tell me which way the dressing room was. Like, you know, like that like sort of thing, like where you walk in the space and they're like, you don't need to be here. So I always remember that, and I felt so unwelcome. But I find strength when people underestimate me. So when you underestimate me, that's when I'll show out. So I always just remember, like, I wasn't the best in the audition room for sure. Like my leg didn't go a full 360, like, but I just, you know, when people underestimate me, that's when like the claws will come out. So if anything, if anybody is showing hate towards you, I honestly just say do whatever. Like, first of all, brush it off, because you don't know, they don't know you and they don't know your talent. They've just seen you. They don't even know what you're capable of. So show out when you can. Like, find the strength and say, like, I'm the baddest person in here, and I am going to do whatever I can. And regardless if you get in or not, you know that you did something for yourself, not for that person or those.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
I think of also when I go to an audition now, I say to myself, Dominique, you're just taking a class. Like you're taking a class to the betterment of yourself,
Yeah.
for your technique, for your experience. So just come in here and take a class. Whether you get it or not is not what you should be worried about right now. You should be worried about, this is for you. Like, you enjoy dance, this is for you. Okay. And also, like, when you go in with that attitude, like, I've had some of the best auditions ever and met really great people. Like, I expected people to be really like mean, but when you go in with that attitude of, this is a class, then I think a lot of great things can come out of that too.
Yeah, that was a great question, Phoebe.
I see Malik has a question also.
Yeah. Also, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask us a question too verbally as well.
Yeah. But let's do that at the end. Let's just briefly talk about the fundraiser, and then we can go back to the.
Sorry, I'm not looking at the outline, y'all. I'm just going through it.
We went off script. Sorry, Jenny. Thank you. I'm a moderator.
No. Okay.
For the International Blacks Association of Blacks in Dance. They are a wonderful organization that supports Black dance and Black choreography and Black dance companies. So we, as of now, have raised a total of $859.
Yes.
So thank you to everyone who has donated. If you have not, your 1, 2, 4, 6, all of those dollars go towards it. So please don't be discouraged if you only have $1.
50 cents, whatever you have.
Fine. If you can't, then share with your friends and family. Tell them to open up their purses, because right now is the time that y'all need to open. I tweeted this the other day. You have the bag, the tote, the purse, the tote bag, the messenger bag, the mini backpack, and the clutch. Open your purses. Like, get your friends and family to open their purses multiple. So share that information with them. All of it is going directly towards this association. I actually got to speak with the director of the association about 2 years ago, and she loves AU students. So if anybody like wants to get in touch with her, she's awesome from AU. But she definitely has, really opened my eyes in conversation about how Black dance has been it's such a vital part of our lives as Black people, but to the better, like to this entire country, if that makes sense. So I definitely, please, if you can donate or know anybody who is interested in donating, please send it to us.
Yeah.
Dominique or Jenny, do you want to add anything to anything I said?
I was just gonna say the mission statement and the value of
Go for it.
Yeah.
the fund. So it's basically their mission is to preserve and promote dance by people of African ancestry or origin, and assist and increase opportunity for artists in advocacy, audience development, education, funding, networking, performance, philosophical dialogue, and touring. And their value is to validate the significant connections and influence that dance by people of African ancestry or origin have on the American and international cultural landscape.
Yeah.
So everything that you were saying. So yeah, our goal is $1,000, and we're so close. We're gonna be posting on our socials. Are we gonna do another bingo?
We'll probably do another bingo. We're also, I just share it as much as you can. We're almost there. So any 1, 2, 4, 6, or 8, whatever you got, please send it our way. It will go to benefit and support Black dance companies and Black artists. And we need them, because if we don't have them, we don't have the majority of the dancing that we do now. So we need the Black artists, we need Black choreographers. If, like we were saying, to further educate others who are doing these dance forms, but it helps to show what's going on. Like my goal when I make work is to show what's going on in my life or outside of my life as a Black person. So it allows that to continue. So please, if you can, donate to us to give it to IABD.
Yes. Someone said, can you donate through Cash App?
Yes, I will put my Cash App tag right here.
Okay. And so with the last 7 minutes that we have, we can do some questions. I'll look at the chat box first.
There's one from Malik.
How do you translate some such complex and multidimensional issues into movement? Where do you start? How do you create movement that your audience who perhaps don't have an extensive understanding of Black issues can understand?
Question.
Who, Malik? Where do I like to start with tangible things. So like I had the letter, that was my first thing. Like when I made my first piece about Trayvon Martin, I had a sweater. I had tangible things, and I had the letter, and I was like, what is it about this letter that is making it? I didn't know what it was doing. The universe was telling me something about this letter. I didn't know what it was telling me, but there was something about this letter. So I found the letter, and then moved on from there. But I also like to start with music, and I know some artists don't like to have music, but music, I learn a lot of dances and can remember them best is because I start to memorize the little nuances in sound, and I get inspired by those little nuances in sound, especially with live recordings. I really like things that are live recordings, because you hear the little somebody drop their drumstick, you hear that little thing, or that little tick or something. I like to work with that the most. So I like to start with music, and then I layer on the music. I have the music now, I have the physical thing, and I just start building my stuff from there.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, when at first I was making a dance about colorism, I was like, how in the world do I break down such a intense, difficult to talk about, difficult to understand, multifaceted, multi-layered topic, right? And I started with breaking down the words that I associated. So I did a word map. So I have colorism in the middle, but then I have words like bleach, sun, skin, hiding, shade, shelter, fear, different words that you can attribute certain movement patterns or movement vocabularies to. So I think making a word map, I'm a very visual person, so I also love like writing things down. So I think a word map could help you kind of dissect and just get a start to be able to make some movement based on this topic that you want to address, because all those little words end up, pointing right back to the main concept that you're trying to address.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope that answered your question.
I hope that
I
answered.
really do.
We can talk about that more later too, Malik.
Elizabeth said, what has been your experience doing this work with other POC groups? How have they responded? In terms of interacting with other POC groups, I feel like some of them, like people do find a connection to my story and their own story. So I found it has been a very therapeutic. I don't know if therapeutic is the word, but there's clearly a connection to things that other POCs have experienced. May not be the same exact thing, but they can empathize in some type of way. Whether it may not be them in particular, like right there in this moment, but it's their people's history. So they can connect to you in that way. I'm trying to think. I think everyone who I've interacted with, I know for myself, has responded fairly well, and want to continue the conversation, and they branch off their conversation to their specific group or race, whatever. They're branching off from what I do. I've seen, they branch off and they want to see where they can find in their history, maybe not in themselves, but in their history, to bring up these topics too.
Mm-hmm.
I think I definitely have had overall, it's been a positive response. If anything, I'm hoping that my work inspires other POC groups to speak up about the colorism maybe in their community, or police brutality in their community, or whatever oppression they're going through, because I can't make that work for them, right? Like, I'm a Black person and I can speak for myself and I can speak for African American community, but I can't necessarily speak for Afro Latinx community. Like I can maybe make inferences and support them, but they have a different experience. So I think it's also important to have solidarity with other POC groups as they address their oppressions and their struggles that they're going through. And I think that's been the most inspiring thing for me to see, is that they support me and therefore are inspired themselves, if they're not already making work about it, to make work for their communities as well. Yeah.
Okay. Britta.
Go ahead.
Thank you you're the moderator, not me.
Oh, okay. So Britta says, how do all three of you sense yourselves as leaders for younger Black dancers?
Start, Jenny.
Yeah, you start.
No, it's okay. I need to think.
I don't, I don't know.
I think I have, you want me to start? I have an idea. Yeah. So for me, one way that I want to be a leader and for the younger Black dancers is offering free dance classes. So I go back to my old high school and middle school and I teach free dance classes, and predominantly most of the students there are Black students. And so dance classes are expensive. Ballet classes are expensive, modern, to be a part of a company, to buy the costumes, transportation, like getting home after late night rehearsals. Some parents aren't willing to pick their kids up. So like there's different ways to offer dance to younger Black youth, that I feel like that's one way that I do it. And just speaking to them and offering that space for them to at least get interested in it and have an opportunity to engage with dance in a different capacity.
I mean, I don't think I thought of myself as a leader I don't think I ever thought of myself as a leader too often. But I think for young Black dancers especially, I think it's really great to see them want to see this work and want to see themselves in this work. So I mean, I know for me at my dance school, when I go back home, like I was the only like short, not skinny, like like big, like had boobs and stuff. Like I was the only one that was there. You know, everyone else was also like Black or a person of color, but I was the only one that like had a different thing. So I just want to be like, I want to expose myself to those kids because I just want them to see like you can make work or you can be a moving body in this world and like be good at it and like do well in it, because I know I didn't have that. And then when we got that, we have Misty Copeland, and Misty Copeland is great, but like Misty Copeland is also does not look like me. Like
Right.
Misty Copeland is great, but she still does not look like me. Like yes, she does have a little bit more boob than like Svetlana, but like still like she does like, you know, she looks like me, but she doesn't, if that makes sense. So like,
Yeah.
Role model, yeah, Britta said maybe role model, that too. Maybe role model. So just putting myself, I want to put myself out there. So like, you know, like Dominique said, teaching dance and stuff like that definitely would be my thing. And like, you know, I teach kids, like I'm an education major, so I'm going to teach kids and I want to teach in a Black area. So, I mean, I know my kids, I talk about dance all the time with them. Like I talk about, like even the boys, because sometimes the boys are just a little bit extra about having to do a 2-step in class. So just exposing them to that, because a lot of them did not know that they could do that, or that was a possibility for them. So just exposure would be my thing.
Yeah, I feel like I could work on it more. Like I guess like in high school before college, I was more part of the dance community at my dance studio. Like I would volunteer and be like a student assistant or a teacher assistant. I mean, so I guess I was like a role model for younger Black dancers who saw me like in pointe shoes and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to be in pointe shoes, or oh my gosh, I can't wait to work with like this choreographer and be like her. But I feel like I could do a lot more. I'm gonna take some notes from you guys in doing that. So yeah, that answers for this question. And we are kind of like out of time, but I really do like these questions, and they kind of popped up a lot from the Google form. Let's see. What would you like to see from white dance artists to support Black choreography, dance, and the Black Lives Matter movement?
Go see their work. Go see it. Like sit there and like go see their work. Support them as much as you can. I mean, even if you can't afford to go to the show, how can you you know, be visible, you know, for them. It may not be paying for a ticket, but it may be like, I can do social media things, like can I help you with your social media, or you know, something, you know, it may have to be a monetary thing. Definitely doing that. I mean, just there's discomfort in this work. Like this work is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me to make as an artist, but it's uncomfortable for people to see. Like there's just going to be discomfort in that. So like be ready to be uncomfortable about it, and be ready to be uncomfortable with what you may see or hear being created or put in front of you. Just making it more visible and sharing Black artists and what they're doing, I think is like the biggest thing that we could do right now, because you know, we have some Black like company giants, like, and we have some Black company giants, and there are a lot of Black company giants that don't know some of these artists. Which is why I think, as much as I love all of these companies, like I'm a huge fan of all of them, I don't see the Black artists being not as often put in those positions to choreograph work.
Yeah.
So how can we make artists like myself or like Dominique be more visible, sharing it, so that it eventually it'll get up the ladder. Like it'll get up the ladder, but it won't get up the ladder by me just posting about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I definitely want to see especially more white choreographers acknowledging their privilege, willing to be uncomfortable, like Chelsea said, just echoing that, and then also knowing the history of what they're teaching. Like, how are you a jazz teacher and you don't know the history of the form you're teaching? How are you a hip hop teacher and you don't understand the history or the people of the form you're teaching? Like how do you wear our clothes? How do you do that and not know the history or not support the people that you're profiting off of? Because choreography is a profitable business, and white choreographers make money. They get fellowships, they get grants, right? And so I there is a level of privilege, a level of history, a level of education that these people need to have if you're going to profit, right, off of these forms.
Yeah.
So it's really extortion if you don't. It's really, you're robbing us.
Yeah.
And so I just, that's just something that needs to be said, that especially I think that some Black dancers now in these different company giants that we're talking about are calling their companies out, because it's ridiculous that you're not acknowledging what's going on, but you're profiting off of my body, right? So.
Well said, Dom.
Preach.
Yes. So basically, most of these questions were just from white artists, white dancers, who just wanted to know, like you said, how they can best use their privilege to support our work. And obviously, you guys answered it. Just supporting it, watching it, social media,
Google,
knowing the history.
Google is free.
Yes.
Google Scholar is also free. You don't have to do Google. Google Scholar is peer edited and reviewed with sources.
Oh my goodness.
You can
Can
use
I also say something really quick?
Yeah.
Really quick to cut in, but also I've been noticing a lack of spaces being available for Black dancers. Even in predominantly African American companies or Black companies, there has been a shift, an influx of white dancers in these companies. So Alvin Ailey, I'm going to call them out and say it, but there has been works that are for Black people about slavery. A white person cannot perform a work about slavery. How? Sorry. The founder of Alvin Ailey is rolling in his grave to see people performing work that's not about them, not for them. Black dancers need to have these spaces, and this is another area where white viewers, white choreographers can speak up and call people out, that there needs to be space for Black dancers. There needs to be space for these Black bodies, because if they're not, this work is not going to get shown, or it's not going to get shown well.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm sorry to get a little aggressive about that, but it infuriates me to see that these places are being stolen from Black dancers.
You're so right.
And so it's making me scared that the work that we need to create, the work that needs to be continually shown, because people obviously don't get it, that it's not going to have a place on the stage. So that's just another thing that talking about everything that needs to be brought up.
It's just what you found, the foundation of this company was for what? What was its
for what? Thank you.
What was its core purpose? Its core purpose was because Black people, if I were in that time period, I wouldn't even be allowed to go into the same bathroom as a white person. What was the purpose of Alvin Ailey making this company, or DTH, all of them? What was their purpose? Their purpose was because Black people were not allowed to be in the same space as white people, so they needed their own space. And I'm glad that there is some inclusion and we're bringing in other bodies, but now we're losing the original purpose.
Yep.
We're losing the original purpose of what it was made for. Not to say that white people or other races cannot be in these companies. They can be in companies, but we have to remember what was its core purpose. Its core purpose was to have it. And it's Revelations is about Black church. It's about Black baptism. I don't know. I've never been to a church that is not Black, that there is not a tub in there. Somebody is not getting doused into the tub. Revelations is about that. Revelations about baptism. It's about going to church and the ladies gossiping in church. It's all of that. And it gets diminished when I don't see the actual people who this is actually connected to. And I love Revelations. I have memorized Revelations. I love it. But it's just how, what was its core and original soul purpose? let me get off my, we're all on our soapbox with
Yeah.
I mean, this could be a part 2. We can discuss
Close that chapter
another
for right
time.
now.
back to schedule programming.
But I guess we could wrap it up.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely went over time. But thank you.
Comments, questions, concerns.
Yeah, anyone wants to unmute themselves, say anything?
Going once? No. Going twice.
I just wanted to say, sorry, before you go. Hi, my name's Cameron.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Really appreciate this. I joined a little late, but still really glad that I caught this in time. I think that this is just such an amazing thing that you guys have decided to do. And the topics, and I was over here taking notes because I am now a senior dance major at Temple University, and in starting to work through my thesis ideas, this is something that was really relevant to me, and learning about creating and how you guys went about creating your work. And Chelsea, I love you, my big sis. We grew up together dancing, and watching her go through her journey of finding herself as a choreographer has been really inspiring. And to hear you, Dominique, and Genevieve talk about your experiences was really great. So thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Fun fact, y'all, Cameron and I had matching, what are those? Not wellies. I call them wellies, but rain boots.
Rain boots,
Oh,
yeah.
We had matching ladybug rain boots. So we go way, way back. I appreciate it a lot. Anyone else? Last call. You don't have to go home, but you can stay here.
Thank you. This was awesome. I was clapping and snapping, and I didn't want to over clap and snap, so I was doing it too much. But thank you.
Thank you guys so much. So we will be sharing everybody who signed up, and if you didn't sign up and I just sent you a text message with the login information, shoot me a text message and I'll add you to it. But we are going to share the artists that we say and the artists and companies that we think you guys should check out. But if you have any feedback, also please send it to us. I think everyone has our numbers and stuff like that. Phoebe is saying, may I say something quick? Sure, Phoebe.
Hi, I don't want to show myself right now because I look a mess. But shout out to Dominique. She teaches at the school I go to. I'm in 10th grade now, and her mother teaches me as well. She's awesome, and I do not know everyone else on here, but I'm sure you guys are amazing dancers as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you.
All right.
But yes, with that being said, thank you all for coming. I mean, this was awesome. I was nervous, but this is much needed, especially for this time. I feel a lot better.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you guys so
much.
Keep donating if you can.
Yes, please keep donating. $1,000. We're almost there.
Almost there. Okay. I see everyone's thank you. All right, guys. Take care. See ya. Wait, let me pause.